Why are young people getting increasingly disillusioned with religion? I'm sure you're interested in this question, and it's certainly a trend that no one can deny or neglect. Therefore, it's worthwhile to spend a little time trying to understand something about this very important phenomenon of our times. But before I get into this subject proper, let me also say that as of now, disenchantment with religion is not limited or confined to young people. It's spreading right across the entire spectrum of human life, including middle-aged people and old-age people. But most certainly, it's most acute and most visible among young people. There are reasons for this, though very few people are bothered about finding out what these reasons are and what may be done about them. Some of the reasons are perhaps beyond the scope of reform or rectification. Therefore, it's understandable if the people concerned choose or prefer to look the other way. Let's look at a few of these aspects. First of all, young people are disappointed with religion because they realize only too well that religion is made up entirely of substitutes. You take any religion in the world, you will see nothing original available to anyone. Religion is like a museum full of the relics of the past. And when you deal with whatever happened in the past and construct a whole mansion out of it, it makes good sense that you have to substitute for the original experience. Now, the contemporaries of Jesus Christ had this great advantage that they did not need substitutes. They were in direct contact with whatever was happening. They experienced the life and ministry of Jesus Christ. But in comparison, we relate to all these things at a great distance, and that too filtered through various mediums of distortion. To take an example to illustrate what I mean, think of that foremost sacrament of all sacraments in Christianity, the Lord's Supper, or the Eucharist, or the Mass, or whichever way you call it, the Last Supper. What Jesus celebrated was a proper meal. That's been substituted with something purely tokenish or symbolic. So now you get a small piece of wafer broken. In some traditions, maybe a whole small wafer is given. And instead of a proper draught of wine, you get a small sip, a spoonful of wine, and that you often diluted grape juice. But most important of all, the greatest substitution happens when the person of Jesus Christ is substituted with a poor priest or a bishop, whose personality as compared to the personality of Jesus Christ is a horrible, insufferable joke. Now, I don't have to explain this to you, that the significance of anything, significance of any material object, has to be derived from the people who handle or people who come into contact with them. A piece of bread in the hand of Jesus Christ and a piece of bread, maybe the same bread, suppose you have the same bread, in the hand of a priest or a bishop, have no comparison. So, the supreme sacrament of the church in all traditions, all denominations, is a very poor substitute for the original. And therefore, the kind of powerful spiritual experiences that the original disciples had with Jesus Christ at the center of it, no Christian can experience today. And even as churches decay spiritually, morally, the powerful experience that the sacrament is supposed to enfold becomes more and more cheapened and degraded. So much so, the substitute with which the originally substituted becomes even more degraded and therefore even more disappointing. Now, I have often wondered what the experience of the original 12 disciples might have been or could have been when Jesus administered it. And in comparison, what a terrible and disappointing experience it is to have the commemorative repetition of this by people whose personality is a joke compared to the person of Jesus Christ. So this goes right across every aspect of religion that we practice. And therefore, it doesn't surprise me one bit that the frustration, the disenchantment, the disappointment about religion is spreading very fast. And even as the spiritual, moral core of a religion decays, this disenchantment will intensify, escalate, and aggravate. Unfortunately, nothing can be done about it for two reasons. One, you cannot have the original experience because the original experience happened more than 2,000 years ago. There is no way you can recreate the same situation. I don't know what will happen in future times when artificial intelligence and deep fakes, etc., these things become a commonplace reality. Maybe the original experience would be counterfeited, but even that would be a counterfeit. It will not be the original. It will be the mere illusion of the original, which now even that doesn't exist. So obviously there is disenchantment, and that disenchantment is real. It's there for everyone to see. What could have mitigated this disenchantment is the church taking itself seriously, the priestly class trying to be what they are called to be, imitators of Jesus Christ. And if their personality had come anywhere near, say within shouting distance of the personality of Jesus Christ, the kind of searing disappointment that people feel about receiving communion today would not have been there. Even today, for example, if you receive the Holy Communion or the Mass from a person or a spiritual person like Pope Francis, surely some kind of a powerful spiritual experience can be derived from it. But if you receive the same from a crooked priest or a crooked bishop, you don't expect any spiritual experience to eventuate from this. So this is one real problem which is not being addressed. Not being addressed because it's not easy for priests and padris and bishops to be like Jesus Christ. Though they recommend to everybody else that they should be like Jesus, they exempt themselves from the same duty or the same privilege. The second important reason why young people in particular feel disappointed with religion is what we might call the crisis of relevance or the reality of increasing irrelevance. Now, the second reason issues from the first. Young people live in the present day world, they live in the present. Whereas everything about religion is derived from the distant past. Religion by nature is backward looking, and young people by necessity are forward looking. So they can be compared to two boats. They are in the same river, but one boat is headed eastwards and the other is headed westwards. And what harmony can there be between them? I don't understand. So if the priestly class expect young people today whose situation in life is quite different from what it was when these priests and bishops were young, and expect them to have the same degree of artificial piety, I think they got it completely wrong. For one thing, the young people today are far more honest and forthright. The reason, of course, is very simple. Young people today can afford to be forthright and blunt because they have the means to do so, the financial, worldly means to do so. Plus also they live in a culture which is a culture of worldly liberation, and therefore in this culture of liberation, the binding authority of, say, parents, priests, etc. has suffered a serious blow. Young people do not consider themselves to be duty-bound to kowtow before the authority of constituted centers of authority. All writers on modern culture agree that three things have taken a severe beating in modern times. They are tradition, religion, and authority. I repeat, tradition, religion, and authority. All these three things, which constituted the cornerstones of life in olden days, have taken a severe beating. And the problem was not so acute in Eastern societies before the advent of globalization. But because globalization actually meant swamping of the whole of the world by the Western culture, the Western cultural norms and assumptions now rule the world over. Therefore, even in Afro-Asian societies where traditional authority meant a lot, have undergone a sea change in this respect. I can see, for example, the difference between two generations, my generation and the generation that came after them, in this respect. My generation actually accepted the authority of the elders, authority of priests and bishops, authority of teachers, and so on and so forth. But the generation that came after that did not. And the present generation certainly does not. And this problem, or this particular pattern, I don't want to call it a problem, this pattern will continue. But the strange thing to me is that while all this is happening, no attention is paid by the authorities of the church to take note of these patterns and to see if something can be or needs to be done about it. They go on marketing the same old merchandise as though nothing has happened since the time of Adam. And this is another factor that aggravates the crisis of relevance that I'm now referring to. Above all, young people are frustrated with religion because because of the hypocrisy that they experience. Unfortunately, they don't realize that hypocrisy cannot be helped as far as religion is concerned. People think that hypocrisy is a new disease. It's not. Ever since organized religion came into existence, and in particular, ever since a priestly class emerged within religious structures, hypocrisy became the hallmark of religion. And this is not something that I discovered. It's something that Jesus enabled me to discover. If you look at Jesus' perception of the priestly class of his days, the only attribute, the hallmark that he attached to them was hypocrisy. And that's not an accident. The reason, of course, is, or should be, obvious in light of what I have said so far. When you are dealing with substitutes, and pretending that the substitutes are absolutely real and genuine, you are condemned to function within a matrix of falsehood. So you cannot really take these assumptions, religious assumptions, seriously. That's the reason, for example, why the creed has to be repeated. Most Christians don't realize that the need to repeat the creed every Sunday arises precisely because no one takes the substance or the ingredients of the creed seriously. If you really took the affirmations in the creed seriously, you needed to state the creed only once. The fact that the creed has to be repeated every Sunday, the creed has to be affirmed and reaffirmed repeatedly and routinely, means that nobody takes it seriously. And the reason, of course, is very simple, that these articles of faith included in the creed do not influence the life of a single believer anywhere in the world, including the members of the priestly class. And yet these things have to be repeated time and again, time and again. For example, take just one cardinal affirmation in the Creed, the virgin birth of Jesus Christ. For God's sake, tell me how that influences you. How does that matter to you? How does that matter to a young person? Nobody bothers to think about it. They think of any item, any article of belief in the creed that we recite Sunday after Sunday and ask the question, how does it connect to the life of a young person? Take the belief in Trinity. Which Christian is influenced by the doctrine or dogma of Trinity? Which priest, which bishop is influenced by the dogma of the Trinity? Even if the dogma of Trinity is tomorrow discarded entirely, do you think it will make any difference whatsoever? And yet, these things are really exalted to the position of ultimacy, and it is done so precisely to sideline real life issues. And therefore, when young people look to people in religion for any worthwhile guidance or inspiration, they draw a blank and they're terribly disappointed. And the young people of this generation, if they discover that they have been made to eat a bunch of lies, they will not take it lying down. They react, and they should react, because they have no need to live in subjection to a bundle of falsehoods. On the other hand, I have to say this based on my extensive experience of young people. The youth of today are far more honorable, truthful, self-respecting than the youth in my generation or the generation that came after mine. If you can convince them that what you're saying is sincere, you mean it, and that there is some substance to it, they will really respond to you in a manner that will take you by surprise. You will be, in the words of C.S. Lewis, you will be surprised by joy. On the other hand, if you simply expect them to take all these things on faith, so-called faith, whatever meaning you ascribe to the word faith, then I think you're going to the wrong customers. And I don't blame the young people one bit. Why should any human being live a lie or live on the basis of anything of which they are not persuaded, convinced, or clear for even one day, leave alone a lifetime? So they find it insufferable to subject themselves to this ordeal. Take, for example, a Sunday worship. My good folks, let me ask you this question. Does any one of you feel inspired on account of attending a Sunday worship? Do you emerge from Sunday worship even a whit better or more spiritually enlightened than you were when you entered it? Do you carry anything about it, even a faint memory of it, as your life begins on the weekday, come Monday morning? None at all. It's as though it has never happened. You don't carry anything from the Sunday worship experience into the weekdays. Nobody does. And yet so much importance is attached to attending Sunday services. Why? Young people ask the question why. They have every right to ask the question, and the generation that expects them to fall in line have a duty to give an answer to the question, why? Why? And if you can't, don't expect them to dance to your tune. Who has given you the right to call the tune? So, there is a problem on our hands. I believe that a sense of godliness is of extreme value, especially to a person who is young. It's when you're young, full of energy, full of potentialities, possibilities, that you need a sense of direction in life. And to me, the ultimate sense of direction is God Himself. I sincerely believe that God is the fountainhead of life, and the highest wisdom for living meaningfully can be therefore derived, or has to be derived, from God. So I don't see any substitute for godliness. And I cannot accept religion and this false piety as a substitute for true godliness. What do you find in the personality of Jesus Christ, which is also the secret of the personality of Jesus Christ, is the distinction between true godliness and false piety. There was plenty of false piety at the time of Jesus Christ. Wherever there is a priestly class, there will be false piety, there will be a world of hypocrisies. Jesus walked out on it right at the beginning. He tried to get along and found for himself that it was simply impossible, that he would perish, his mission would be ruined. Therefore, he went his own way, and that was the way of godliness. And it is in the course of that experience that Jesus says, I and my Father are one. I assure you that this is not the kind of statement that a conventionally pious person can ever make. A conventionally pious person whose piety is defined by his church denomination can only say that I and the Marthoma Church are one, I and the CSI Church are one, I and the Catholic Church are one. That's the maximum you can go. But that's the most foolish and useless thing in the world. And that's the most dishonest thing in the world, because you and your church can never be one. Because your church is always ruled, guided, misguided, hijacked by an elite, a religious elite who have their own interests. They don't care tuppence for you. If you think that they do, you're seriously mistaken. I've seen it all. But in contrast to that, you have Jesus Christ, who came to give his life to you. The Son of Man has come not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for the sins of the world. Why should he give himself as a ransom for the sins of the world? The answer to that question is found in the 10th verse of the 10th chapter of John's Gospel. I've come that they may have life, and life all in its fullness. I challenge any church, any denomination, or any abomination in the world to stand up and say, I exist that you may have life in its fullness. Young people understand that. Young people will be attracted by the prospect of entering into life in all its abundance. But churches are a far cry from all of that. They have nothing to do with life. They are full of substitutes and substitutions. And wherever there are substitutes, wherever any institution or structure or system subsists on substitutions, hypocrisy is inevitable. And that's the reason why Jesus Christ associated, more than anything else, first and foremost, hypocrisy with the religious establishment. So all these things are deeply and bitterly frustrating, disenchanting for young people. And it's high time that those who are running the affairs of these various churches sat up and took notice. You have lived long enough in denial. You have taken too much and for too long for granted. This will not work. You have to come and identify yourself with the plight of young people to be able to minister to them. That's what Jesus did. Jesus identified himself with the plight of humankind in order to minister to human beings. Jesus became like them. You can't help a person from a distance. You can't help people sitting in your ivory towers and doing your pantomimes. This is stupid, insufferably stupid. And people have taken it long enough. Young people will not take it anymore, and it's good that they refuse to play this game, because they insist on something real, they insist on a modicum of honesty, and they'll have nothing to do with hypocrisy, because they have no use for your hypocrisy. And I have to say this, I see this trend extensively in my extended family circles. Young people are now resolutely refusing to be associated with various church circles, including, I have relatives by marriage belonging to the Orthodox Church, to the Marthoma Church, to other churches, denominations. Young people are saying, I will not play this game anymore. I've had enough of it. And it's good that it happens. I hope that people will wake up and see that the earth has moved under their feet and that they can't go on peddling the old merchandise in the days ahead. The sooner they do so, the better. Thank you.